Episode, gentlemen. This week, the name on the marquee is not one of the two men that was in the main event this past weekend at UFC Mexico. It was the winner in the co-main event, Brian T-City Ortega, who defeated Yair Rodriguez by submission via arm triangle choke. The official time, 58 seconds of round number 3. Mark, start us off. Give us your impressions of this fight. It was pretty back and forth. Yair scoring heavily in the first round. Ortega rallying back in the second and ultimately getting that finish in the third. What's your take?
What a fight. What a performance from Ortega. Certainly deserving of jumping Royval for the marquee here. But I got to tell you quick before I get into this fight, I'm pretty sure it was me that made Brian Ortega roll his ankle. I shit you not. I was watching Volk get introed last week, and he did the exact same jump up and down thing, like pull the legs way up, 2-foot jump that a lot of fighters do. And it came into my mind, and I was like, wow, like I never really thought about this before, but so many fighters do that big dramatic jump. It's kind of odd that no one's ever gotten hurt and like rolled their ankle or popped a knee or like who knows what doing that. And the very next fucking card, what happens? Brian Ortega does it and rolls his ankle. So that was me. My bad on that. Thank God it didn't steal the fight from us because that would have sucked. But holy fuck, that was wild, man. Especially in such a big spot. That was wild to see. But about the fight, I love Brian Ortega. He is one of my favorite fighters. He has been for a long time. And he's just special, man. Both in his life and as a fighter. If you've been watching Brian for any amount of time, you know the way that he fights. He will absorb damage, sometimes an ungodly amount of damage. Sometimes he'll be losing for large chunks of the fight, but he will keep coming forward until he finds an opening, until he finds a way to turn the tide in that fight. And you also got to give him credit for doing that same thing here in his personal life to get back to this point, because he got hurt 2 years ago against Yair. And in the time since, he lost a very high-profile relationship that obviously a lot of people know about. He had multiple friends die, according to him, a couple of them very close friends, one apparently his best friend. He had 4 surgeries and was at what sounds like the lowest point of his entire life, and also said that he had more than one time where he was like, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this because my body is just not holding up and letting me do this, and was debating if he should do something else with his life. Then he comes back from all that and immediately rolls his ankle as he's being introduced in the octagon. Do you know what a mind fuck that is? Like, if you've competed in any sport in your life, you know how much something like that right before you're about to start can fuck with you, especially with everything he just came back from. All those thoughts about, can my body do this? And for that to happen, it's so easy for all those thoughts to creep right back in his mind. Like, my body is betraying me. Like, it's not happening right now. And then Yair opens the door even wider for Brian to do that by fucking him up in round 1. He came out like a buzzsaw and Brian was flat. Maybe it had to do with the ankle. Maybe it had to do with the mental. Maybe he just was flat. Who knows? But he paid for it bad and he got dropped a couple times, bleeding. He hurt in round 1. And to all of that I just described, Brian Ortega was able to say no. He ignored it all. His mind was stronger than any of those negatives. He pushed through it, and he was on top of Yair before round 1 even ended. And then round 2, more pressure, typical Ortega style, walking forward, finding his way inside through obviously the danger that Yair is throwing, found his takedown, and then really once he was on top, Yair wasn't offering much resistance, and he just wore Yair down in that round as much as he could. And by round 3, it was easy. One more takedown directly into mount, perfect transition to an arm triangle, and Brian Ortega is back after everything. And it's a tough one for Yair because remember, there used to be some red flags about the grappling of Yair. Like, remember what we saw Frankie Edgar do to him however many years back. And you kind of got to think about that again now, coming off a loss like this. Like, he really did not look good when he was on bottom. He did not have much to offer to Ortega. So you think about other guys in this division like Evloev or if he was ever matched with Topuria or plenty of others, what he does from bottom. And that was not a great look. So that's its own issue. But what a night and what a return for Brian Ortega. A performance to remember for him, for sure.
Omar, let me bring you in here. Give us your impressions of the kickboxing on display from Yair Rodriguez in the first. Wasn't able to seal the deal, and he left the opportunity for Ortega to come back in the second. And what happened in the third happened. Give us your take.
I mean, you got to love the striking from Yair. Yair is as crisp as ever. As far as the finishing aspect of it, man, I mean, he gave it his best shot.
Oh yeah,
Ortega is not an easy one to put away. You could probably nitpick things in those sequences, maybe that he could have done better that might have led to a finish. But the reality is, it's controlled chaos in there, and I think Yair did as good as anybody was going to do against a beast like Ortega, a guy that comes forward. Now that Korean Zombie's gone, Ortega might be next in line for a similar moniker. You know what I mean? I thought Rodriguez did very well in the beginning. Obviously, kind of put the beats on Ortega really quick, but it was the work to the body I was super impressed with. It was a lot of kicks to the body, a lot of front kicks to the body. We've all seen, like Mark said, Ortega take a ungodly amount of damage, and guys are very tough taking damage to the head and all that kind of stuff. But the body is really where there's not enough toughness in the world to stop you from eating multiple shots to the body. I say that full well knowing that Ortega survived that first round, but it wore on him, and it definitely ate at him. And you could see how that second round, he had to find something else. He didn't go in there, trying to outstrike Ortega or Rodriguez at that point, right? Ortega's got hands for sure. The kid's boxing is crisp, but Ortega just had he had that distance management on lock. Like, that was all him. Anything he wanted to do, he was able to do it and get out of the way. He could do a little bit better when it comes to the dodging and the slipping. He does a lot of straight back movements when he's trying to dodge or slip a punch, and that's still getting him in trouble. He needs to do, I think, a little bit more side to side and a little less just straight back. But that's really nitpicking stuff. I thought the performances were fantastic, even from Ortega, man. His ability to adjust in the second round, make it a ground game, show how high level he still is. The transitions were fantastic. The actual control from bottom was fantastic. And the way he was able to pick that up right in round 3, like if nothing had happened, and like if round 2 had basically never stopped, picked it right up in round 3 and just got that choke right away. I mean, his jiu-jitsu at this point really might be some of the best in the UFC at this point, just overall.
So good, dude. And there was clips of him drilling that exact sequence in his locker room right before the fight with, I think it was with Henner Gracie. Man, gutted for Yair, because I fucking love Yair Rodriguez, man. I love watching him fight, but I also love Brian. I also love Ortega. And this was definitely one of those things where I was not going to be happy seeing either one of these guys leave. What were we going to say?
I was just there were choices that Yair made in that fight that I feel like lost him that fight, and it's really starting to, and a lot of it has to do with his propensity to go down to the ground. There was one point where he tried to go for a guillotine on Brian Ortega. What the fuck are you doing?
Yo, that guillotine was kind of tight though, man.
But he's never in the right position. Yeah, his arms were in the right position, but his body never was. Like, at no point.
It looked like he had a chance to be, though. I don't know. I don't know. I know what you mean. If you don't have Brian Ortega that you're trying to guillotine, it's probably not going to work. I get it.
And that's kind of my point, right? It's like, if you don't have it, like if you know you don't have it, you're going to lose position. And he never got back up. He never got back up once he got down on the ground after going for that submission. Yeah. It's just not worth it. Like, if you're beating this kid, and to Yair's credit, he was not afraid to do some ground and pound on the ground, right? To play with Ortega on the ground and really get down there. And I loved that. I was all about that. But then you start playing with him in his world, and you landing ground and pound and keeping a base and not allowing Ortega to get anything from full guard is not the same as going for a guillotine, ending up in bottom, and then surviving for the rest of the round.
Yeah.
That approach to the ground is completely different than what he was doing in the beginning in round 1. And I just feel like I don't know why, because it's not the first time we've seen him do that either, where he's like, okay, going down to the ground and just being on bottom and like trying to figure something out and like spending time down there but like he spends the whole round down there and just loses. And
That's
it's not
what I mean
because he's
about it being
necessarily a
concerning.
bad fighter. You know what I mean?
If he has nothing off his back, he can't fight like that. And I'm not sure he can stay upright against dudes who are dead set on taking him down. So it's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. And he's not bad off of his back, but
No,
when
against
somebody is
most guys,
better,
he smokes them. I mean,
right.
at the elite level.
Right. Yeah. When we're talking about a guy like Brian Ortega, like he's, you're not going to get a submission like you got on Josh Emmett. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. So I don't know. I wish some of his decision making in those big moments was a little bit more cautious, in the sense that he wouldn't do something like jump guillotine in a moment like that, where he's winning the fight, where he's dominating the fight up until that point, and then just let it go.
I will add that I'm very mad at myself, because the way that I described and predicted this fight the first time they fought, and then called back to it last week as how I still saw it in a vacuum, is pretty much exactly what happened. And I said I was too afraid to pick it because of the layoff, and I picked Yair. And I hate that I did, because I would have loved to brag about the Ortega pick, because it seemed like most of the world was on Yair coming into this, but well.
Okay, let's talk about where these guys go from here. Mark Ortega, I believe, did not call anyone out specifically in his post-fight Octagon interview. Where do you think he goes from here? How close is he to another title shot?
I mean, it may be a title shot. Like, it's not that crazy that it could shake out that way. It hinges on two things. One, how much time does Volk want to take off? And two, can Max beat Justin Gaethje? And even kind of 2A, if he does beat Justin Gaethje, is he going to be calling out to Poirier or looking to do some other thing at lightweight? Because if Volk does want the fight and Max does want the fight, I do think the order is still Volk number 1, Max number 2, Ortega number 3. But if Volk doesn't want to come back till later in the year, and if Justin beats Max, Ortega might get this title fight right now. So it's very possible. If he doesn't get it, my guess is he probably is going to have to fight Evloev, which is a great freaking fight. But it's possible. We got to see what happens here.
Omar, your thoughts?
There's not really much flexibility from that, to be honest. The featherweight division is pretty rigid right now, especially with Alexander Volkanovski having just recently lost. Rematches are on the horizon. Not really much else you can do in that situation other than what Mark just described.
It's true. So, Yair Rodriguez loses this one. Omar, where do you think he's going to go from here?
I think it might be time for a fight with him and Arnold Allen. I don't think we've gotten that yet. And I think we're there. I think it's that time.
Love that fight. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment as much as we were just talking about his grappling. I agree with the sentiment of keeping him away from like the Evloevs of the world at the moment after that loss, and at least letting him try to get a win back under his belt against a striker. And I think there's multiple fun options depending how high or how low you want to go in these rankings, but any of Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze, and even Edson Barbosa we've never seen before, and I would be highly entertained by all three.
Yeah, love all those. Okay, man. Moving right along up to the main event. Once again, the spotlight was stolen somewhat by the two co-main combatants. But now let's go back up to the main event for UFC Mexico, which, by the way, went down at the arena in Mexico City, Mexico, this past Saturday night in front of 21,000 strong. My goodness. In the flyweight division, in the main event, Brandon Royval got it done over Brandon Moreno. He got this one by split decision, gentlemen. The scorecards read 48-47 and 48-47 for Royval, and Moreno getting his own 49-46. Omar, let me start with you with this one. Give us your take. Who did you have winning that fight?
I might be on the minority here, and there might be a little bit of bias here, I guess. But I had Moreno winning rounds 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 5 were not great rounds for Moreno. I saw one judge gave round 5 or every judge gave round 5 to Moreno. But I thought even round 5 was a little sketchy for Moreno. I thought Royval was putting good combinations together. He wasn't landing the same way that he was in some of the other rounds as far as Moreno was concerned. But they came in with a real interesting game plan. Moreno fought a little bit differently than he's fought other guys, definitely differently than he's fought Royval in the past, relying really heavily on duck under long looping hooks, and trying to close the distance that way. I guess they were trying to take advantage of the reach of the arm length that Moreno has. I think the real issue with this fight and what made this fight, I think, difficult to score overall was the approach to the striking. Moreno was very focused on trying to land big shots on Royval, whereas Royval was much more concerned about landing volume and keeping a pace and a lot of peppering shots, not doing a lot of damage, but definitely doing a lot of touching. And I think in the earlier rounds, I think it favored Moreno. I think he was landing a lot of those bigger shots. I think he was touching up Royval a lot more than Royval was touching up Moreno. The ground game and the shots from Royval weren't working out all that well against Moreno. I think he was able to counter a lot of them very well. Moreno was also able to get some of his ground game, or at least his clinch game, going for a little bit. But when it came down to it, I thought that Moreno had just done more damage, had landed the bigger shots in the first 3 rounds overall, and had just done good work in the first 3 rounds. And then in the 4th round, I thought that he slowed down a little bit. You could see Royval had picked up the pace quite a bit, started moving, started trying to put feints and jabs together and combos together. And that's where a lot of the peppering really started to come in. I think a lot heavier in this fight was towards the end of the fight. And so I gave Royval rounds 4 and round 5. I was, again, seems to be in the minority there with the round 5. But I thought by round 4, I thought Moreno had already done enough to win the fight in general. So I wasn't surprised to see the scorecards everywhere because, like I said, I can tell when a fight is going in the direction of maybe what you favor as somebody who's a combat sports person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We've seen judges favor different types of approaches to fights versus others. So I knew it was going to be a little bit of a mess. So I'm not surprised, but it does seem like MMA Decisions also has Royval winning, and as opposed to Moreno. So like I said, I might be in the minority here, but that's how I felt.
Mark, bringing you in on this one, how did you score this fight? Do you think that Royval should have had his hand raised? And what were your thoughts on the fight overall?
It was a very odd fight overall, just as a whole, because of the way that we saw both guys approach it. And Omar kind of touched on this as well. But on one hand, you had Brandon Royval, who was active as hell throughout the fight, but he was also throwing a lot of punches at like 20% power, like just little pitter-patter shots. So it was kind of tough to try to figure out how you were going to score his output. And then on the other hand, you had what I felt like was really one of the least technical and also least aggressive performances we've seen from Brandon Moreno. It seemed like his game plan was primarily to wait and make his reads early and then try to catch Royval on big counters as he got his timing down. But it almost seemed like, even though he did land some big counters here and there, it seemed like he got too stuck in that and almost lulled himself into this waiting and being more active than we're accustomed to him being. And then even when he was, I just didn't think the boxing looked as tight and as crisp as what we usually see from him. So it was an odd fight for me from Moreno. And it was a weird one, to score because of these styles. I do think the judges got it right in regard to the winner. The rounds on the judges' scorecards were all over the place. I don't really get that because to me, the rounds were pretty straightforward. I thought it was clearly 1 and 2 for Moreno. I thought it was clearly 4 and 5 for Royval. And I thought 3 was the round worth discussing. And it seems like almost the entire anyone I've spoken to feels the same way. So the judges' cards just don't seem to match with what the public saw in this fight, oddly.
Uh-oh.
What happened?
You froze a little bit.
You froze for a second. You're good.
Keep going. But yeah, I had it 48-47 for Royval. And just to, I guess, walk through these rounds quickly, Round one, like I said, I gave this round to Moreno. It was a lot of whiffing from Royval early, and Moreno was waiting and, again, not even countering all that tightly, but he did still land enough to take the round because Royval didn't do much, so that was 1-0. Round two, I thought it was pretty clearly for Moreno. He was landing the heavier shots, and I had him pretty significantly ahead before Royval had his few moments that he had late, and then Moreno even got the takedown just to seal it and make sure it was his. So I had it 2-0. And then, as I said, round three, I will admit, was the one round I would let you debate simply because this was the primary round where this Brandon Royval issue really reared its head the biggest, which is that his volume was so high, but his impact was so low in this round. That was the most pitter-patteriest round of all. So that, because of that, it was tough to score, but I felt like the pace was up enough. He was in Moreno's face enough, and that he was landing enough that I couldn't really not give it to him. So I did give 3 to Royval, and then round 4 was easily his best round. The volume was still there. He was landing cleaner. He mixed in the grappling. He mostly had Moreno whiffing in that round. That was a big adjustment round. Moreno basically only had the leg kicks. He was missing on everything else. And then round 5 was somewhat close, but I don't really get to giving it to Moreno because that's the round where Royval finally started upping his impact. He was like, it's the last round. I'm going to commit on these punches now. And the power was finally there, and I thought he edged that round too. So for me, it was 1-2 Moreno, 3-4-5 Royval. I thought that they got the winner right. As shocked as I am, because I don't necessarily feel like Brandon Royval is better than Brandon Moreno, and I just don't quite get why this fight went the way that it went. But I do think Royval got it.
I do agree. And I'm happy that he did, man. I'm happy for him that he got one over on Moreno. And let's just march right into talking about what could be next for Raw Dog. Maybe one of the best nicknames in all of MMA. Mark, what do you think?
So I get that Pantoja does not have an opponent right now. I don't love just throwing Royval right back in there with him. I don't think there's much buzz on that. I don't think the fans are dying for that. It's not like he just finished Brandon Moreno or something. Obviously, there are people who think Moreno won the fight, as you just heard from Omar. So I don't know that I would jump right to that. I think you have a couple guys sitting there, like Amir Albazi, who was supposed to be in this fight against Moreno initially. You have Manuel Kopp hanging around, who never seems to be able to get into a cage, either because of his own fault or his opponent's fault. You even have Makayev fighting this weekend. If he were to win against Alex Perez, I think you can kind of look around this landscape and pick one of these guys and make Brandon Royval get another win before you're going to march him into a title fight. I don't know what that means for Pantoja. Does he wait a bit? I don't know. It doesn't feel like we should be saying, okay, Pantoja Royval too, at least not to me.
No, I kind of agree though. I mean, it just, we start getting into the weird territory where this kid is probably, he is legit number one contender in the flyweight division. So how far back are you going to throw? How far back is the opponent we're going to throw at him? And it's because you can't really, can't punish him, right? He just fought Pantoja. It went the way that it went. He fought Moreno now. Maybe Albazi, maybe another one with Kai Kara France, which seems almost just as repetitive, to be honest. Maybe New Blood is the way to go, but it just seems like you're going further down the list in an area where Royval has probably earned a better fight. So it's a rough spot for Royval. He's in a weird area there.
No matter who he fought, even if it was Kopp, who's only ranked, I don't know what he is, 5 or 6 or something.
6.
I think they would announce it as the winner is getting Pantoja. I don't think the guy's number would necessarily matter because I think the UFC would frame it as, this is our fight to see who fights Pantoja.
And does Manuel Kopp get a Pantoja fight? Because that also seems fucking crazy.
If he beat Brandon Royval, he'd be number 1. And I know Royval's number 1 right now. It's just that he just lost to Pantoja. I don't know. If you're listening and you have a better idea than we do, leave a comment. But I mean, 100%. Maybe it's just Albazi then. Albazi's 3, if that's what you want to do. I don't remember what Albazi's injury was. I don't remember how long he's actually out for. But I don't know. I don't know.
That's the only one that really seems to make the most sense. But yeah, it's a little bit of a mess for him, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's talk about Brandon Moreno, guys. This guy has been up and down a number of times. He has held a title 2 separate times. Omar, let me start with you. What do you think is next for the baby assassin? No, the assassin baby. No. What the fuck is it?
Assassin baby.
The assassin baby. He doesn't kill babies.
Originally, his nickname was the baby assassin. And they were
was
like,
it?
Yes. And they were like, bro, you are not going to be the baby assassin. We are going to have to turn these words around. And he was like, all right.
Yeah, because in Spanish, the direct translation from Spanish is baby assassin. And,
how do you say in Spanish?
Bebe asesino, I guess is what he would call himself. So yeah, it didn't go over well when they told him how to directly translate it, and then he started going around saying, "I'm the baby assassin."
That's terrible.
Yeah, translations can be rough, kids. Be careful with all that.
Don't let them near hospitals. My God.
So just for context, real quick, Amir Albazi had a neck injury that had him pull out of Royval. So neck injuries aren't great.
Gotcha.
Not great. So we might not see him for a minute. But as far as Moreno's concerned, man, I feel like Moreno has fought 3 people in the last 7 years. And I wonder if it's time, since the last guy that he fought that isn't on this is Jussier Formiga.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 2020. And since then, he's basically fought a Rolodex of 3 guys just over and over again. So I think it'd be interesting to see him against somebody new, especially with this little bit of a rough streak, if you will, which, is controversial nonetheless, but here we are. And maybe, just maybe that's the one you give Manuel Cop to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I agree. If it's not, if it doesn't end up being Cop and Royval, that you could certainly do Cop and Moreno. But I am very intrigued by this Henry Cejudo call out for the Sphere at UFC Noche. I understand it's not till September. I know that's a little bit of a wait for these guys. It's not horrible. But man, if you're the UFC, how do you ever resist that one? It's 2 huge names. They have a rivalry. They're going to talk it up. It is the perfect fight for UFC Noche, especially with Henry's whole thing and how apparently the Mexican fans are not super fond of Henry because he doesn't embrace them. Obviously, Brandon embraces them more than arguably anyone. You have that whole angle to it. They're both coming off a loss. It gives each of them a huge fight that they're in, even though they both have kind of fell out of the title scene. I don't know how you pass that up. I really don't.
My real question is that thick-ass Henry going back down to 125? Because
that's my only question. But, I mean, if you told Brandon, let's do this at 130, I don't think Brandon would say no. You could just do a catchweight feature fight or some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm about it.
Yeah, man. Anything else you guys want to say?
Honestly, the wrestling from Cejudo concerns me from Moreno.
I think Cejudo would be the favorite. I do.
I would agree.
But
and that makes me super sad.
I'd want to watch it.
Yeah, man. Let's move on to who is next? Oh yeah, this fight. Zellhuber. Man, he looked nice in this fight. Let's talk about in the lightweight division. Daniel Zellhuber gets it done over Francisco Prado by unanimous decision. The scorecards read 29-28, 29-28, and 30-27, all for Daniel Zellhuber. Mark, let me start with you. What were your impressions of Zellhuber's nice win?
This was another great fight. And I got to tell you, I already liked him from prior to now, but I like Francisco Prado a lot. And he came out here and really fought a perfect first round. Sure, he was getting caught on some ends of jabs and ends of kicks because of the length, but he was mostly able to walk through them and weave his way inside and land his power shots to the head and to the body. And that's exactly the recipe that he needed here to beat Zellhuber. And I thought he won round 1. But then in round 2, that Zellhuber jab went from a defensive range keeper that it was in round 1 to a weapon. And he hurt Prado early with it. Then he cut him with it. And the fight changed right there because Prado started to back up a little bit. You could see visibly Zellhuber's confidence shoot up and his aggression went right up with it. And he really never looked back from there. As that round went on, he got so dialed in on the range. And as much as Prado stayed in the fight because he's a little pit bull in there, he was just outgunned once Zellhuber had that range down because he needed to get inside of it. And once Zellhuber kind of got it, he never lost it again. And he really had Prado stuck. It was a great fight. Prado was battling, don't get me wrong, but it was a great night for Zellhuber. And it's hard to believe that that's the same kid who dropped his debut to Trey Ogden and looked bad in it, because we are now seeing everything that he was billed to be, and he's looking very strong at this point in his run.
Yeah, man. Omar, talk to me about where you would want to see Zellhuber go next in the division.
We'll talk about the fight as well, Omar. He didn't get to yet.
Oh, my bad.
I mean, there's not really much to add to that fight. That fight was a fantastically. It was like a fight between two Terminators, which was absolutely crazy. Prado has a type of toughness I don't think I would have. I think once my eye was completely fucked up, I think that's where I'm like, I think we're good here, guys. I think we're all right. Instead, he stuck to the old wise adage of, you don't need your eyes.
That was great.
Yeah. So credit to him for pushing through that, man, because his eye looked mangled by the time everything was said and done. I did love the fight, though. Mark made a great point about the range, because especially once you get to the later rounds, the more that fight went on, the more you can see Prado was just getting tagged with jabs while he was going for shots and just swinging in the air. I mean, he wasn't anywhere near Zellhuber in a lot of those situations towards the end of that fight. So it was definitely a great fight from Zellhuber. Beautiful technique from him, for sure. As far as where he goes from here, where do you have this boy ranked, Mark?
Do I have my rankings open? Yes, I have Zellhuber ranked 33rd.
33rd. I don't know what Malarkey is doing right now, but he's had a little bit of a rough go as of late. Might be a good one for him to get into.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find someone that I think is the perfect choice, honestly, but I settled on Nasrat Hakparast. He's another guy who's on a nice little roll recently. I feel like they're at really similar points to reference my rankings that Omar just brought up. I literally have him at 32, so right next to Zellhuber. I think you pair the two of them and see who can really emerge and earn a fight at that next level up.
Yeah, man, for sure. Anything you guys want to say about Prado, Mark?
I'll throw one out. I'm a fan of his. I like this guy. He's maybe a little small for the division. I mean, in this fight, he looked super small, but it's only because it was against Zellhuber. It's not like he's a midget. But he's a beast. He's like a little Vanderlei-esque in there. I like him, and I know he's only 1-2 in the UFC, but I think you give him another shot against someone who at least is somewhat established. So I will go Lando Venata.
Okay, Omar.
I actually had a similar thought. I feel like I'm setting him up with this fight just because it's another dude with another rangy kind of style, but I was thinking about Jai Herbert.
Okay.
I almost said that, and then I literally was like, that's fucked to tell him he's fighting another giant.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. All right, boys. Let's keep marching down this card here. Where am I here? Yes. The women's strawweight division, Yazmin Jauregui jumps right back in the win column with a very nice unanimous decision victory over Sam Hughes. A shutout on the scorecards. All three judges scored at 30-27 for Jauregui. Omar, let me start with you. What is your take of her performance in this women's strawweight bout?
Her striking is so good, man. Her technique is so good. I guess if there's anything that she lacks at this point, I guess it's that power that, like, because there were a lot of shots that she landed nice and clean. And I think if she had a little bit more oomph behind them, I mean, Sam Hughes, there would have probably been a lot of instances where Sam Hughes would have ended up on her ass. But Jauregui had good work in there, man. Combinations were clean. They were creative. I mean, there were moments there where she was throwing a lot of different types of combinations just to keep Sam Hughes on her toes. She was throwing boxing combinations. At one point, she was throwing hooks to head kicks. I mean, she was putting a lot of shit together, man. And, you know, she was getting tagged every now and again, but for every one she was eating, she was giving back 3 or 4. And Sam Hughes was never comfortable in there. You could see it. Her corners were trying to... Her corners were telling her to stand southpaw to sort of alleviate the right hand. But it didn't seem... First, she's not southpaw, right? Like, Sam Hughes is not a traditional southpaw because I don't feel like I've ever really seen her southpaw, and she didn't look very comfortable southpaw. For every time she was going southpaw, she could like immediately was trying to go back to orthodox. So seemed a little weird. I'm curious what the game plan was there and what the real end goal of her being southpaw for that amount of time was really supposed to be, because it didn't work out in her favor. But it was a beautiful performance from Jauregui, exactly what I expect from her, and seeing the way that she strikes. I loved it, man.
Yeah, man. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, it became apparent pretty quick in this one that Sam was not going to be able to take Yazmin down. And in a pure striking match, Yazmin had really every edge. She was much faster, hit harder, even though she couldn't put her down. She still hits harder than Sam does. Much greater variety in her technique. She controlled the range better. It was just a tough night for Sam Hughes to deal with that when she couldn't at least introduce the threat of the takedown even to kind of change that fight. And for Yazmin, it was a bit of a showcase of her skills and of her creativity, which is really exactly what she needed after that really quick KO loss in her last fight. So she's back now, you know, restart the hype train at least a little bit. The talent is clearly there, and she takes another step forward with a win. So we will see what happens next, but Hughes is nothing if not tough, so that's still a nice win for her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jauregui is no joke, man. I'm so excited to see her back in the win column. I think that the UFC overall is better when Yazmin Jauregui is in the win column. She improves to 11-1 mark. And give me the name of the next girl that you want to see her match up against next.
I'm going to keep moving her up the line here, and I'm going to make a banger for this next one. I think we have a striker's delight between her and Loma Lookboon.
Oh, okay. Okay. Omar, any other thoughts?
That was actually my second choice. My first one, which I thought was an even more of a banger, was Molly Meatball. Put Meatball in there with that fucking Jauregui girl. Too. That's madness. Especially the Molly that we saw at 125.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, 115.
Yeah.
Sign me up for that. 100%.
Yeah, it's a fun one too.
Yeah, bro. Anything you guys want to say about Sam Hughes, Omar?
You know, I know Vanessa Demopoulos has a fight coming up. Maybe the winner of Vanessa Demopoulos and whoever the hell it is that she's fighting would be a good one.
Okay, Mark.
Emily Ducote.
I think you mean the loser. I'm assuming.
Loser, right? Yes.
Yeah, I mean Hughes, as much as she did have a nice little stretch, she is 3-5 overall in the UFC. So I think she's got a. What'd you say?
He might be.
What?
You were frozen again.
Why do I keep freezing?
You're good now. I have no idea.
So yeah, what was I saying? She is 3-5 overall in the UFC. So I think she's got to kind of go down the line a bit here. So I will pair her with Polyana Viana.
Ooh, very nice. Polyana Viana in the news
I didn't
recently.
realize Polyana had 10 fights in the UFC already. Like that.
Has she really? Wow.
Yeah, dude. She's 4-6. Like, it's not great.
I would have said like 8, but yeah, 10's a lot.
Yeah, shit. I did not realize she's had that many fights in the UFC already.
Yeah, 4-6, yeah. And Sam's 3-5. There you go. What a perfect fucking matchup by your boy.
I guess we're moving on.
Yes, sir.
Moving on. Let's see. In the lightweight division, Manuel Torres defeated Chris Duncan by submission via rear naked choke in the very first round. The official time, 1:46 of round 1. Mark, take it first.
Dude, Manuel Torres does it again in basically the same way that he always does it.
Yeah.
Which is that he looks insanely talented while still getting hit super clean dead in his face. It's the one flaw so far, and it's always there. And as he keeps moving up, he's going to eat. I want to say he's going to eat one that he can't eat. He's going to eat one that he can't absorb. So it's a bit of a concern because it happens every single fight. But that aside, he is nasty. He will drop you. He'll submit you. He's strong as hell. We see now too, because Duncan is a strong dude, and he got overpowered here by Torres. And he doesn't like to play with his food. He's in there to get the kill as quickly as possible. And he did it again. So big win for Torres, big win in Mexico City. And we'll see how big they go with his next step here. Because as I said, the talent is very obviously there, and he crushed it on the mic, I thought. So he's a guy who could really get an opportunity to jump up quickly here. But yeah, I'm just a little concerned with the getting hit cleanly dead in his face every fight.
Omar. You're muted.
Omar, you're muted. Omar, you're still
muted. You're still muted. You're muted.
Omar,
I got it. Here we go.
Because I got it.
Manuel Torres is a beast, man. I feel like this kid came out of left field. I know he's had a couple fights in the UFC already, but it still just feels like he's coming out of left field with these performances, man. Like he's really, really good. And like Mark said, like, matter of fact, he's sort of like a Brian Ortega, but everything that a Brian Ortega fight has in 3 rounds, he does it in 1. He just condenses it all into 1 round.
That's fair.
So he'll get fucked up, he'll come back, and he'll submit all within 1 round, where Ortega takes 3 rounds to get it done. And he looked good, man. It's really exciting. And I think the thing that, works for Manuel Torres is after he has a performance like that, he's able to play to the crowd. He's able to take in that moment and sort of have a little bit of showmanship with it. And I think that's going to take him a long way, especially if he can keep having performances like this. So good on Torres, man. He's got me interested. I'm definitely here for another fight for him, for sure.
Yeah, man. Mark?
For the matchups?
Yeah, sorry.
I know he hasn't, it's kind of been, not to knock guys, but I mean, Chris Duncan was 2-0 in the UFC, but still somewhat lower tier names to this point. But I do feel like he has been good enough that we can kind of jump to that veteran test part of this journey. So I will say either like a Vince Pichel or Clay Guida, or someone at that similar level. I think it's perfectly fine to move him up to that point already.
Okay. Omar, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't hate it. I might even think of somebody like a Mark DeCasey, or even somebody like a Rick Glenn. I'd be okay with one of those as well.
Like it's anything you guys want? Excuse me. You guys, what the fuck am I saying? Want to say about Chris Duncan?
I put a name here. I'll go Atman Azaitar.
I knew you would. Not Atman Azaitar. I meant that you put a name.
Yeah. I'm always prepared in case you ask,
Gotta ask. Omar, do you have any thoughts about Duncan's next opponent, or should we go to the rankings?
I think a fight with Roosevelt Roberts would be a good fight. Roosevelt had a strong showing in the Ultimate Fighter, and then kind of had a little rough return to the UFC, but I still think he's talented. I think he still might have something to show. So I think a fight with him and Chris Duncan could be good.
I like that fight.
So, hey, we're not doing lightning round this week, but real quick, I just want to shout it out. That fight in the featured bout in the prelims between Jaime Barcelos and Christian Quinones. Man, oh man, what a fight that was.
That's right. You give my boy Jaime Barcelos a shout out.
That's what I wanted to bring up in case you guys wanted just to say a quick little piece about that performance.
I loved it. I actually thought that he looked a little bit old for the first time. And someone on commentary, I think, actually said it too. I don't remember who or in what context, but someone made a similar point, which is just that like he's still so good, but it was the first time I felt like his fast twitch was not fast twitching the way it usually does. So that sucked a little bit. I know he is I want to say he's 37 or something like that. But my man gutted it out, and he still got it done. Freaking snatched up the sub, and I was pumped about it because he was my biggest bet of the whole card because I didn't think he could lose that fight, and he fucking had me nervous there for a bit, but he got it done.
Yeah, man.
I also got to shout out Edgar Chairez. Apparently, he had some issues cutting weight, so it ended up being a 131 catch weight. So we should preface that real quick. But let me tell you, man, this dude, Daniel Lacerda, came in that cage. Looked like he was all hyped up to be in there. Didn't give a fuck about the Mexican crowd. Everybody could kiss his ass, this, that, and the third. He had his boy. The champ has a name behind him. I mean, everything was going for Lacerda here. And Chairez walked in there, full Mexican dad bod, didn't give a fuck. Was like, let's get it done. And triangled Lacerda. And the first thought in my mind was, if you get triangled in front of Charles Oliveira and that's like your team, I feel bad for you when you go back home, my guy.
They let you
I can
come
only
back?
imagine.
Do they leave you in Mexico?
That's got it. And I was looking at his defense, and I was like, I don't know if this is the right defense for this. Maybe it was. I'm not.
He's
0-5
in the UFC. It has not gone great.
It wasn't a good showing. It was a good showing for Chairez for sure. And he got up on that mic and I was sympathetic to his cause as far as his family and things like that were concerned. So I usually give guys that miss weight a little bit of shit, but he won me over. So here we are.
Well. Okay, Mark, give us the update to the rankings on the heels of UFC Mexico.
I don't have much to say here. I try to keep it to where you got to move at least more than 2 or 3 spots for me to put your name on this list. And there was almost every move was 2 spots on this whole card. There was nothing really super significant. The only guy in my rankings this week is Manuel Torres. He went from number 65 to number 58 at lightweight. Nice. So just, continues the slow, steady climb. And that's all she wrote.